who had successfully dealt with the smaller storms were less successful when they applied the same methods to the 100-year storms. These general remarks prepare the ground for a specific hypothesis I put forward, or I have put forward, to explain the recent financial crisis. It's not derived from my theory of bubbles by deductive logic. Nevertheless, the two of them stand or fall together. So here it goes. I contend that the puncturing of the subprime bubble in 2007 set off the explosion of a super bubble, much as an ordinary bomb sets off a nuclear explosion. The housing bubble in the United States was the most common kind, distinguished only by the widespread use of collateralized debt obligations and other synthetic instruments. Behind this ordinary bubble, there was a much larger super bubble growing over a longer period of time, which was much more peculiar. The prevailing trend in this super bubble was the ever-increasing use of credit and leverage. The prevailing misconception was the belief that financial markets are self-correcting and should be left to their own devices. President Reagan called it the magic of the marketplace, and I call it market fundamentalism. It became the dominant creed in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was President of the United States and Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What made the super bubble so peculiar was the role that financial crises played in making it grow. Since the belief that markets could be safely left to their own devices was false, the super bubble gave rise to a series of financial crises. The first and most serious was the international banking crisis of 1982. This was followed by many other crises, the most notable being the portfolio insurance debacle in October 1987, the savings and loan crisis that unfolded in various episodes between 1989 and 1994, the emerging market crisis of 1997-98, and the bursting of the internet bubble in 2000. Each time a financial crisis occurred, the authorities intervened, merged away or otherwise took care of the failing financial institutions, and applied monetary and fiscal stimulus to protect the economy. These measures reinforced the prevailing trend of ever-increasing credit and leverage, but as long as they worked, they also reinforced the prevailing misconception that markets can be safely left to their own devices. That was a misconception because it was the intervention of the authorities that saved the system. Nevertheless, these crises served as successful tests of a false belief, and as such, they inflated the super bubble even further. Eventually, the credit expansion became unsustainable and the super bubble exploded. The collapse of the subprime mortgage market led to the collapse of one market after another in quick succession because they were all interconnected, the firewalls having been removed by deregulation. That's what distinguished this financial crisis from all those that preceded it. Those were successful tests that reinforced the process. The subprime crisis of 2007 constituted the turning point. The collapse then reached its climax with the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, which precipitated the large-scale intervention of the financial authorities. It's characteristic of my boom-bust model that it can't predict in advance whether a test will be successful or not. This holds for ordinary bubbles as well as the super bubble. I personally thought that the emerging market crisis of 1997-98 would constitute the turning point for the super bubble, but I was wrong. The authorities managed to save the system, and the super bubble continued growing. That made the bust that eventually came in 2008 all the more devastating. After the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers on September 15, 2008, the financial markets had to be put on artificial life support. This was a shock not only for the financial sector, but also for the real economy. International trade was particularly badly hit. But the artificial life support worked and financial markets stabilized. The economy gradually revived. A year later, the whole episode feels like a bad dream, and people would like to forget it. There is a widespread desire to treat the crisis as just another crisis and return to business as usual. But reality is unlikely to oblige. The system is actually broken and needs to be fixed.